You're watching Every Days and Saturdays, USCC veteran. Let's go, baby. And here's your host, Bryan. And what's going on, friends and family? Thank you guys so much for joining us on another great coffee talk with Bryan. And of course, my special guest and co-host who's been hanging out with us, going through our storylines. We have Marie Slider Henriksen. Oh, well, let me get her in here. I just need to change this up. There we go. Boom. Bah.
Hello.
You think I know what I'm doing by now, but it just goes to show you, I'm still human.
Yep.
How are we doing today?
I'm doing okay. Glad to be
Doing well.
here.
That's right. Yeah, always having some fun. But before we get started, let's go ahead and brew up some coffee by Cash Coffee. Love me some coffee in the morning. Little something to get me going. Hey, that K9 Cash Coffee is a really good blend. I really liked it. Definitely little not strong, not overly strong. So if you like really strong, I would probably go with the mean. I think it's Mean Gene. But for if you like a little bit strong, but not like overbearing strong, K9 was a good one. Definitely liked it. All right, so here we go down the road, and today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really a big struggle in the veteran community, and that is getting out and getting that DD 214. What's next, right? What do you get? What do you want to do? What are you going to do if if you didn't have any kind of plans while you were in? Obviously getting out, you got to come up with one, and it seems like the clock just starts going fast, and you run out of time so quick. But before we get started, let's go ahead and hear a great poem from the great Marie Slider Henriksen.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be here. So the poem that I was thinking about reading today is called The Wolves, and it's based on the old Native American tale. I don't know if it was ever I don't know like all the details if it's true, like if it really is Native American or not, but it's contributed to Native Americans, and it's about the two wolves that we have inside. And the story goes that grandfather was talking to his grandson, and he was saying that there's two wolves inside, one of darkness and one of light, positivity, negativity. And the son or the grandson was asking, well, grandpa, which one wins? And grandpa says, the one you feed. And so this poem is based on that story. The reason why I wanted to read this one is, before, during, and after the military, I constantly had this fight going on inside of me where there was light, but there was also so much darkness. And in my journey, I kept feeding the darkness, which kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the light kept dimming and dimming. But no matter what, neither of them left. They were both there the entire time. And so now that I am feeding the light more, the darkness is still there, but I'm not feeding him anymore. And so that's kind of what this poem is about. So it's called The Wolves. I'm kind of blind. I have to wear bifocals now normally. So
Guess what? They're really trying to push me into those, and I'm like,
they're amazing. They are fantastic. The only reason I'm not wearing my glasses now is because of the glare, and it makes it look crazy. But they are fantastic. I'm telling you, they're worth it. So I have to zoom everything on my computer.
I know I was really reluctant to wear glasses in general, but once I did, it was like going from like regular TV to 4K. I was like,
Yeah. Oh,
wow. I even saw like little cracks in the ground and I was like, whoa, it's just like my vision became so much better.
yeah. It's worth it. Okay.
So they say.
So the wolves. I wrote this one back in February, so it's only been a couple months or six months, something like that. I can't count. Okay. One wolf inside is getting strong by feeding on the light. The other one, who seeks the dark in blindness, tries to bite. I used to thrive in darkness, seeking to be numb. They say the one we feed will tend to overcome. I stopped feeding darkness when I saw his lies. He was getting even stronger, eating my insides, taking liberties to weaken me so I couldn't fight. Now the other wolf duplicates the light. Since I've been feeding light, I finally feel at ease. Yet I still feel darkness. His breath is like a breeze. When light fills every crevice, I feel my muscles building. I'll never really know all the things he's shielding. As I'm taking in more light, I know I'm getting stronger. My list of reasons to continue is slowly getting longer. The wolf of light shines brighter when the dark one goes to sleep. I must maintain good habits to support upkeep. Though he may lie dormant, darkness hasn't retreated. One day I'll meet the source of light, then dark will be defeated. Until that day arrives, whenever he has stirred, I hope I put more light inside, dark's eyesight to be blurred. Darkness cannot win when feeding the wolf of light. I know that in the end, it will be worth the fight.
Awesome. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Well, we'll go ahead and let you start it off. And I know that you had thought about some things that you wanted to probably cover before you kind of talked about the separation. So we'll kind of hear more about some of the things that was, I think probably instrumental in your career. Obviously, it meant something to you because it dawned on you like, I should have talked about that. So let's hear more about that, and then we'll go ahead and talk about how it was landing.
Okay. So, yeah, so a couple things that kind of like popped up that will lead into my getting out, right? There's some things that were good and some things that were bad, or not so good. I can't say bad because everything is just part of my journey, right?
Right.
But some things that were good and some things that were heavy that kind of affected things. And like I thought about a whole lot of things that we didn't talk about, but I won't talk about everything. But like some of the big ones was like one of the really good things that helped me out when I first went to basic training. Right. You talked about before that, when you're in the military, if you weren't a churchgoer, you started becoming a churchgoer sometimes,
Right.
and that was kind of true for me. Like I had fallen away from going to church for a while during like when I was in high school, but I still went to my church's
During
summits
that
and
rebel time, kind of, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But I still continued going to seminary, seminary is a class at school for, kind of like church stuff. And so I
Gotcha.
stayed connected to the spiritual stuff. And when I was in basic training, I started, on Sundays, I would go back to church again because I wasn't having seminary anymore, but I wanted to touch base with church and I wanted to continue staying connected. And the coolest thing that I thought was so fun is there was one day I was sitting at church and I heard a voice that I knew behind me. And I turn around and it was one of my recruiters. So my old
That's
recruiter,
wild.
he was one of the last civilian recruiters there were because there for a while they had civilians recruiting people into the
Ah,
military, but he was one of the last ones because they're like, hey, you can't recruit people if you haven't been in yourself. So they forced him to join if he wanted to continue being a recruiter. And so I thought that
That's
that was just,
crazy.
yeah, I thought that was just the coolest little thing,
So he was
little,
in there in basic himself at this point in time.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
got it.
yeah. So
That is a good one.
yeah, so he had joined right after I did, and we ended up in the same basic, and it was just so funny.
That is too
And
funny.
yeah, so anyways, so I had continued going to church, just kind of touching base, and God put little moments in there letting me know, hey, you're not alone. That was one of the things. And then another thing was throughout my military career, like I had talked about the idea that my bishop, before I had joined, told me that I would be on a sort of mission. And part of it was kind of like a collaboration mission over the years, because during basic and AIT especially, and then when I was in the military in Iraq, I would touch base with my church. I was still connected. I was still praying. I was still kind of spiritual. I just didn't go all the time. But I had these moments of talking to other people and learning about their religions and sharing and collaborating. And, one in particular was there is this Buddhist guy in basic training, and we used to just sit and have such long conversations. And that was kind of like my first experience of other churches and other spirituality, because I had kind of stayed so enclosed in mine.
Right.
And based on that, and then other experiences I've had in my life, has shaped my spirituality now. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But like, I was just having a conversation with a lady yesterday who is a Navajo Native American. And she was talking about that she liked that I have incorporated different things into my spirituality, and it's because of all these experiences that I've had along the way of learning and growing with other religions and other spirituality that has shaped my understanding that God really is everything, you know. And so I wanted to start out with that, because that is such a huge fundamental part of me. Even though I went through such hard moments, I never chose to end it. I never gave up. I kept fighting, and it was because I had this core spirituality and this core belief in humanity. And even though there was so much crap in humanity that I dealt with over the years, there were these amazing people that I call it God dots, right? Amazing people, amazing experiences that kept me connected to the spiritual and the divine, which kept me going during the hard parts. So I just wanted to touch base on that, because yeah, it's just such an intertwining thread. Back then, I couldn't see a lot of these positives, but I can see it now, you
Right.
know? So yeah, so there's that. Another thing that I wanted to say that kind of cemented some of my openness in the world, and something that I just really loved about being in the military, was all of the traveling that I got to do. Like
Right.
I went to South Carolina and then Texas for my training, and then I went to Germany. And when I was in Germany, even though a lot of my stuff was clouded by the alcoholism and the promiscuity and just the depression and the anxiety, because I hadn't dealt with any of my stuff, I had so many opportunities to travel. Like when I was in Germany, I went to Prague. I went to the Austrian sides of the mountains up in, I think it was Garmisch is what it was called in Germany. I went on the single soldiers
Nice.
retreat where I was up, and we decided to go snowboarding. And so we were on one side of the mountains in Germany, and we decided to go to the other side on the Austrian side and then go snowboarding. And that snowboarding event too, I will link it as well. That snowboarding event, at one point, I really hurt my hip.
Ah.
And that I'd already had issues with my hips in basic training. Like
Mhm.
now that I know that I have the Ehlers-Danlos, I know that it's all connected. But I started having issues with my hips in basic training. And then in Germany, I got in a snowboarding accident and hurt my hip again. Okay. But I did some physical therapy, and things were okay for a while, right?
Mm.
Which led to later damage.
Right.
But doing these travelings, it was so awesome, because I traveled all throughout the country of Germany, the 2 years that I was there.
Yeah.
I went up to Berlin and saw the wall. Went to Nuremberg, to Munich, or München is what they call it, and and Bavaria, all of Bavaria, right, which is Germany. Bayern is, and anyways, it's just I had so much fun doing all of these travels. And then even when I moved to Washington, I would go to different states, and I would we'd have 4-day weekends, or we had our 1 week a year or whatnot, and I would travel. I would go down Poland, no, the one just below Washington. Why can't I think of the word? What is this? Oregon.
Oh, I was like, you threw me off so bad. I had no idea where to go with it. I'm just like, I
Oh,
was thinking
dude.
Oregon, but you said Poland. I was.
Wow. So yeah, so
No,
that's
that's
how my
perfect.
brain. Yeah. But yeah, so like I went to Oregon, and I went to Arizona, and California, and Wyoming, and anyways, I would travel a lot, you know, and I just really, really loved traveling. And that was something that kind of kept me sane, even when I got out of the military. I loved traveling, and so that's something that has been just an intertwining factor, that I'm so grateful that I went to the military, because there's so many people I know, right, that don't get the money or the experience to travel, and they kind of stay in their bubble. And a lot of people, when they stay in their bubble, they have a more, not everybody, but a lot of them have a more closed off mind. And so I had the opportunity to experience different cultures. And like when I went to Iraq, same thing. I experienced the culture in Iraq and Kuwait and stuff like that. So that's an intertwining factor throughout my entire career that brought into my civilian life, is that I just loved the idea of meeting new people and having new experiences and changing things up. And I got so used to, okay, every couple of years we're moving. I didn't when I got out of the military, I didn't feel comfortable staying still for too long, because I got so used to moving every couple of years. And so that idea of being a wanderer kind of stuck into my heart. And so that was kind of like a big factor as well, that I brought out, is that idea of I get easily distracted. I want to try new things. I want to travel to different places. I want to experience new cultures. And I have this open mind where I'm meeting different people, and I want to learn, and I crave to learn about people, and it just fueled it all. So then I go into thinking about some of my experiences in Iraq. Okay. So these are kind of some of the big core things that kind of kept me grounded, and some of the positives. Then we go into some of the heavier things. So we've already talked about a lot of the heavier things. I've got the childhood trauma, the teenage trauma. I've got, the medical stuff that I dealt with, being mortared, people being killed, and the different experiences when I was in Iraq. And there was a couple experiences, one other one in particular that I didn't touch base before, where I was I talked about some of the deaths of people that I didn't know, right? There were those soldiers that went over the bridge. There's also that little boy that got shot with the 50 cal. We also had some local nationals that got killed, some contractors that got killed on base. There was a couple other incidents, but one of them that really, really hit me hard, right, was this girl named Erin McClyman. So Erin had been in the unit for a while. I knew her, but I didn't know her as well as a lot of other people did. But I knew her well enough. And her story goes like this. If I'm trying to remember correctly, so she had gone home on leave. While she was on leave, and this is just bits and pieces of story that I've kind of got together. Okay. When she went home on leave, there was some sort of incident involving her sister. And there were people that tried to jump her, I guess. and she got in the middle of it, and in the process she ended up breaking her neck. Okay.
Mm.
So she was doing physical therapy. She was doing all sorts of stuff. I don't remember if she got surgery, but I know that they told her she couldn't come back to Iraq at first. And she was like, "No, I've got to get back to Iraq. These are my people. I got to get back to Iraq." And she got the government involved. She got either a senator or a
Wow.
congressman. I'm not sure who. She got somebody involved, and so she was able to finally come back to Iraq. Okay. So ooh, the night she got back, I ended up hanging out with her and a bunch of other people. And like, I think, I don't remember if she was having lunch or dinner, and then I was having like an ice cream or something like that. And there was just a group of us, and we were all hanging out. We were talking about her being back. And it was just so awesome with her being back, right? And we were glad that she was doing well. The next day, she gets sent out to another fob. And I don't know the full story, but when they get there, their dining facility got boarded,
Mm.
and she was killed on impact. And that one was a really hard one to handle. There was a couple other people that were injured really badly,
Right.
but that one hurt a little bit because that was the first time that I actually put a face to somebody I know that
Right.
had been killed. Like we weren't the best of friends. Like I said, I probably butchered the whole story, but I just remember those little pieces and how impactful it was, because I was like, this is somebody I actually know. This isn't just, battle buddies that I have, that I'm there with. This is somebody I actually know. And I just remember, when I was told, I had such a hard time. And I just remember so many of my friends who knew her even better than I did, and just seeing their heart break.
Mm.
My roommate was really good friends with her, and there was a couple other friends, and that death affected a lot of us.
Sure.
The other deaths did as well, but that one to this day still affects a lot of us, because it was like, this is somebody that we know. and
Right.
um and I've got a couple of friends who have had a really hard time with that one. And there's multiple, but anyways, I just remember how strong that one affected me, because especially like I had to be the one that told my roommate, and my roommate was really good friends with her. She didn't handle it very well. So anyways, so that was kind of one that just hit hard, and it was one of those that, hey, we are mortal, and this stuff is real, and now it's touching home. So that kind of led to a lot more of the insecurities for me, and just wanting to distract in any way that I can and stuff like that. So then we go into one of the things that it's kind of an interesting topic for me, but I think it needs to be brought up, especially as a female in the military. And I know that men experience it too, right? Is that military sexual trauma? Okay, I wanted to make sure and kind of touch base on this. For years, I did not think that I experienced military sexual trauma. I I did not think about it at all until it was years later when I kind of started processing what was actually going on in my life. And this is something that kind of touched base throughout my entire military career, right? I had been a very promiscuous person. Being a promiscuous person, I thought that meant that it doesn't matter if anybody tries. It doesn't matter if all of this attention is just attention, right? And I need to just accept it. I need to either participate with it, even if I don't want to. There was a lot of over sexualization in the military, right? And I was not raped in the military, right? But there is a difference between, being raped or coerced and still having military sexual trauma. And
Mhm.
so I didn't realize that some of these unwanted gestures that I have, even though I was promiscuous over here, that doesn't make these unwanted sexual gestures okay. Okay. And so that was something that I experienced a lot of is it was like, well, you're doing it with this person, so let me touch you. Let me talk like this to you. Let me make you uncomfortable in this way. And I don't want to go into details of all of that, right? But there was
Sure.
definitely unwanted conversations, there was unwanted gestures, there was unwanted, like I went to give I thought he was a friend of mine a hug, and he did the whole, swiping across my breasts, type thing when he was letting go. Oh, I'm so sorry. Giggling. There was I'm walking by and oh, what, my hand accidentally touched you.
Mm.
There was a lot of let me see your breasts, or there was a lot of when I was drunk, sometimes, occasionally I would flash, and people would assume that just because I did that, then it's open for touching, and so people
Sure.
would try to touch me. You know, there was different moments like that. I also had, some lower enlisted and some higher ups, make a lot of provocative comments to me, and so that is something that is very huge in the military. It happens,
It's a
and it was
bad culture that needs to be fixed. Yeah.
yes. But then you go into, I also perpetuated some of that as well, in my own trauma. I really thought that that was my worth. And so this kind of led into my civilian life as well, where I would make those provocative comments. And I would, hug a little longer than I should have, or stuff like that. And it was something that happened to me and that I participated in. And so it's hard for me to like say in my mind, I experienced MST when I was also perpetuating some of this culture. And so it's hard to kind of get into, because then you think about, okay, I was one of those that participated in a lot of the promiscuity, but there's so many people that did not, and they experienced all of these things as well. And so it's hard to think that, like how prevalent the MST really is, you know but that's something that continued to shape my view of myself and my view of the world, that everyone's just what's disposable, you know what I
Mm.
mean, and our bodies are our worth. And so that's something that continued, into my civilian life as well, right? And then the last thing I'll touch on before I get out. So there was another guy that I deployed with, and he was a good friend of mine. And we had spent a lot of time together. His name was I won't say his name. If people want to talk later, I can talk to them. But he was the guy that I was a really good friend with. We deployed with. When we got back, I found out that he had been investigated. So he had just had a new baby, and he had been investigated, and we didn't know what was going on. And then there was one day that I was at my friend's house, and I get this phone call.
You don't know what he's being investigated for at this rate?
I didn't even know he was being investigated
Right.
until, for a little while. But when we got back, he had been investigated. Come to find out, he was arrested for being a kitty toucher. He had
Pedo, huh?
his one of his, years ago, he had a son with another wife,
Oh gosh, no.
and I believe it was a son, either a son or a daughter. I can't remember right now. Like I've kind of blocked some of it out. The child died from
Nevertheless, it was a child, right? Just yeah.
yes. So the baby, it was a baby in a crib that died by SIDS. Okay, that is
Yeah.
what the official story was. The baby
All right.
died by SIDS.
Okay.
The baby didn't die by SIDS. The baby died because of what he did to the baby. And I will leave it at that. But the baby was suffocated. And how they ended up finding out was some of his nephews, nieces and nephews, and some other neighborhood children came forward saying, "Hey, so and so touched us. So and so touched us." While he was being investigated, when he got arrested, he admitted to what happened to his child. So this is somebody, yeah. And he had a brand new baby at home. They were doing this investigation and they let him go home to this little baby. Yeah. And so then his wife or girlfriend at the time, like she was so concerned, not knowing if something happened to her kid, because finding out all of this. So anyways, like the unit kind of exploded for a little while because it's like, this is somebody that we know about and care about and we trusted. And then this happened, like, how do we even know and understand anybody? Like,
Right.
like what the heck? It was so mind boggling to me because I had never met evil like that before. And I was just, it was so mind boggling. So anyway, so that was right before I got out that I found out about that. And so like I'm reeling from all of this other trauma that happened and then finding out that somebody that I cared about did this, and I was just, and you add on to that, I'm getting medically discharged. My hips have gone out. I can't work out the way I used to. There was just so much stuff that was reeling around, and my mental health again was just not good. I just had
Mm,
tanked,
yeah.
and I wasn't good. And so that leads me to the last couple of months in the military, and so I was getting medically discharged and doing all of the paperwork. They had moved me out of my unit and they put me into the brigade surgeon cell, and so I was able to make sure that my medical discharge was going well because I was actually in charge of the medical discharges. So I was helping other people, but also making sure that my stuff was good. So this leads me to getting out. So I got so super, super blessed because I already had a disability percentage when I got out, which is amazing. The horror that I have seen for people getting out of the military without a medical discharge and how hard it was for them to get their disability, I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine because when I got out, I already had all of my medical and I already had a paycheck coming in. But there are so many people that get out, they don't have the medical, they don't have a paycheck. Because for those of you who don't know, okay, if you don't get out with a disability, if you don't have your disability, the military just stops paying you. They stop paying you and they stop giving you medical treatment. And so that's one of the things we were talking before this was that veteran homelessness. We have all of this stuff taken care of for us. And then we get out and so many people are just left to rot. And so my experience was I had the money, I had the medical, but I did not have the emotional support. I lost all of the friends and battle buddies. I didn't know how to pay rent. I didn't know how to pay insurance really well. I didn't know how to do taxes. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff because they kind of touch base on a few things, but they don't give you adequate enough treatment or not treatment, training,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
and
your
and
focus is on a different, thing. I mean, they're training you for something else, not how to live as a civilian.
Yes. And I think and I will die on this hilltop. There needs to be better reintegration. And I don't know what it's like now, but at least for me, we had like 2 weeks of reintegration processing, and it was just making sure that the paperwork was filled out. It wasn't very much of here is what to expect. And so luckily, I was super, super, super blessed to be an advocate for myself because I asked questions. But I saw all these other veterans that did not, and they got screwed over. but I asked all of the questions. I sought for help. I sought for the mental health treatment. I sought for school. I sought for all sorts of stuff. I was very much an advocate for myself. And so I got out of the military, and I only spent, like a couple of weeks. I only spent a couple of weeks kind of doing my own thing. I did some partying and this, that, and the other, but I was like, I need to do something with my life. So I knew that I was not mentally okay. I knew that I wasn't ready to get a job, but I knew I wanted to do something different. So I started going to school. And so I decided to get into a community college, and um, along these lines, in the colleges, and for a lot of people who don't know, if you go to college, they usually have a veteran organization. And so I got super, super involved with a veteran organization, in the school. And so like I said, I was a huge advocate for myself because I knew I could not do things alone, even at that point. And so I would go to the veteran organization and I would touch base with them. And so that is how I got a lot of my knowledge to be able to be my self advocate, you know. And so around that time, I'm still reeling from everything else. And so I started going to the VA to talk to them about my mental health. But I still was not in a very good place. And I would talk about this over here. So you didn't ask me about this. I would talk about, hey, yeah, I experienced this, but I'm not telling you that I'm drinking and drugging. I'm talking about this over here with, oh, bodies I experienced, but I didn't even understand the concept of military sexual trauma, and so there's like things that I'm talking about that, and then other things that I don't even know that I need to talk about at that point, and so yet again, my focus, it was a lot of partying and drinking and promiscuity and stuff like that. But at this point, I am going to school. And so I started going to school for elementary special education,
Hmm.
and I loved it. It was so much fun. I was doing hours in the classroom. I touched base, and this is something that is intertwining throughout my life as well, is that idea of working with special needs. When I was in high school, I was a special needs tutor, and in the home and at school, I was doing elementary, kindergarten classes for special needs. I was doing a church class. We called it Mutual. It's something for teenagers to go once a week to have like church lessons and activities. And we had one specifically for special needs children. And that's ages 12 to, I think the oldest child we had was 62, with the special needs community. But I had always stayed connected with the special needs community. And so when I got out, that was my original plan, was I was going to school for elementary special education. While I was going to school is when I realized how much I loved math. And I realized I actually was really, really good at math. So as I'm getting this special needs degree, I also, like, I felt so intelligent, like, so this matters because now where I'm at, I've lost a lot of my cognitive processing and my memory because I
Hmm.
and in losing some of that, I had to challenge my worth, that I thought that my body was my worth in some aspects, but I also thought my brain was my worth. And over the years, God has told me, nope, your brain's not your worth, your body's not your worth. You're having cognitive processing issues, you're having physical body issues. This is not your worth. Find your worth in me. And that's what God's been telling me, right? But back here, there was a lot of ego involved with it because I loved math, and I started being a tutor for mathematics. And so then I switched my schooling from elementary special education into math. And I I finished up my degree for the education. I got my Arizona General Education Curriculum Certificate. I got my AA in General Education, and finished off at this community college. And then I started going to school at Arizona State University, and I started going to school as an applied mathematics major. Okay. So I'm doing all of this schooling and whatnot, but then on the side, I'm still partying. On the side, I'm also trying to take care of my mental health, but not doing really well. Oh, and then I got into a relationship that I was very codependent and very alcoholic. Okay. He had his own issues. And like I said, if he ever wants to share his story, he can. But for me, I was so stuck in codependency. So the man that I got engaged to, I had been in the military with him, and
Mm.
we knew each other. We deployed together. We knew each other when we got back. I didn't know him until we got back from Iraq, but I knew him for about a year and a half when we got back, and we were just really good friends. And about 9 months after I got out of the military, I went back up for a wedding and asked him to be my date. And that just started a long distance thing. And he ended up getting out of the military. So when I was about a year out, he got out of the military and moved down to Arizona. Now, during this time, remember how I was saying that I had gotten into this mindset about, wanting to move, or like, I wanted different experiences, and feeling like I needed to try different things and move different places and travel and stuff like that, right? I had this feeling that I wanted to move to Florida when I got out. I was like, for some reason, I need to move to Florida. I had moved back down to Arizona. I tried to move home because I was like, that's what I know. And I tried to reintegrate in my old life, my old high school life, and my old family life and stuff. And I just knew that I wasn't comfortable there. Like, everything had changed yet had stayed the same. I had changed yet had stayed the same. I just didn't feel quite comfortable in Arizona anymore. It was like everybody's moved on with their life. I've moved on with my life. I'm a different person. I don't know why I'm staying here, but I am. But then I had this really deep, intense feeling from God that I needed to move to Florida. Around this time is when John moves down to Arizona. I had told him, "Hey, I want to move to Florida." And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Oh, I'm joining the reserves. I can move the reserves to Florida." And so we're like talking about, "Okay, awesome. We'll do this." Well, he comes down and gets out, and he decides, "I don't want to move to Florida because my kids are here or closer." His kids were in California. And so he's like, "I don't want to move." And instead of following that feeling, intense feeling I had from God to move to Florida, I choose to stay. And that was kind of part of part of the resentments that I built towards him, and also part of me recognizing that when I get that feeling, I need to follow it.
Mhm.
Okay. But I did not. And so that ensued a couple years of a very codependent relationship, because instead of choosing God, I chose a relationship. Now, I loved John in the way that I could, in the way that I could. And I know that he loved me. But I was so stuck in codependency, I started using him as my higher power.
Mhm.
I got to this point where I could not function unless I was around him. And for years I was like, "Oh, I can't go anywhere without him because he needs me. He needs me. I've got to do this stuff with him." And the reality is I didn't know how to function without him with me. And so I fell away from friends, and everything that I did mostly was about him, you know, but I was miserable and I was blaming it on him. And there was just a lot of stuff that was going on in there. And so at one point, our life looked like on on the outside, when we would hang out and socialize with other people, we were doing great. Like we were going to fancy restaurants, we were hanging out with friends and family, and like we had these huge smiles on our face, and on the outside things were good.
Mm.
But what would happen more often than not is he would go to work, I would go to school, I would come home, I would start drinking, I would cook us dinner, he would come home, he would start drinking, we would eat, and then we would sit on the couch, sitting away from each other. He'd be on the computer or on his TV, video games or whatnot, and then I'd be on my computer, and there was like no socialization that was going on. And like for me, I would just get drunk, and there was multiple times that we would go out, and I would say, "Oh, I'm gonna DD," and so like we had the moments that we would go out, and I would get drunk, and that was fine because he's DD. But then on the moments that he wanted to he that I wanted to DD, before he even had like one drink, I already had like four or five, and it got to the point
Mm.
where I couldn't drive. And so
Right.
there was so many times when I just overstepped the boundaries because I could not face the emotions inside of me. And so I used John as my higher power, and I used the alcohol as my higher power. And so I don't know how I finished my classes because I was just so full of self pity, and I was so full of frustration and anger and self pity. And like I said, I was using it against him, and I was kind of holding him hostage. And at one point, I was miserable. I knew he wasn't happy, you know, but at one point somehow it I had guilted him into asking him to marry me, and he was resentful about it. I was resentful for it because we weren't ready to get married, but yet we get engaged even though we weren't ready, and so there was just a whole lot. And then there was other things that happened, and I could go on and on about this relationship, but there's just a lot of things. He wasn't happy, I wasn't happy. And so when I was about a year into my BS in applied mathematics, right? I'm going to Arizona State. I'm trying to function as best I can, but I hadn't processed through anything, we decide that it's time to end it between the two of us. We're like, we need to be done. So we've been together for about 3.5 years. So now we're at so I got out in December of 2011,
Okay.
you know, finished up my degree, had the relationship with him a year into my BS, and now we're at 2015. And there was a whole lot of stuff that happened, and at the beginning of the end of the end, right, was I was just living in this alcoholic mind frame. And I wasn't drunk at this point, but in my alcoholic mind, I had gone to California to go pick up his children. And I did not get rest. I did not sleep. And I had the mindset to, hey, I'm going to pick them up in California, and I'm going to drive all night to Arizona. And so I picked them up, and we're driving all night. I'm not processing right because I hadn't slept, but I'm driving his four little children in the car with me. Okay. And at one point, we end up pulling up on there was this old couple that was driving a oh, what's it called? One of the Winnebagos, the trailer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were driving
That's
one
what
of
I was thinking.
those.
Winnebago in my head, but
Yeah. And they had like a trailer behind it. They were going 40 in a 70. Okay. And I was probably going 80 in a 70. And it was still dark. It was right at dawn, you know. They didn't have their hazards on. And I was exhausted, and I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And so by the time I saw them, I They saw me, I saw them. I slowed down. I had to like slam on my brakes because we had cars going one way. We had a hill on this side, so I could not pass them. I'm slamming on the brakes. They're trying to move as fast as they can, and I end up just smacking them really hard with John's kids in the car.
Oh
You
gosh.
know, thank God I slowed down enough and they sped up enough that we weren't going at 70 and 40, like
Right,
we had
right.
we had we had
It
found some
lessened
sort
it
of middle
lessened
ground.
the impact, I
Yes.
imagine.
And thank God they had this little two-wheel trailer behind, because what happened was a two-wheel trailer went up and broke off of their trailer. So it didn't impact them. And then the
Wow.
impact for us just moved the trailer up so we didn't smash.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So it was so lucky that things didn't happen, any worse than that. So
No
I've got these
kidding.
4 children in the car that are just like traumatized. They are
What's the age
safe.
range on these 4 kids? Are they all what's you don't have to say
So
all
I
their age, like, what's like
12 to 4, I believe,
wow, okay,
or
yeah,
5. Yeah. And so, anyways, it was just such a rough experience. And it was because I was not in the right mindset and I didn't rest when I needed to, right? That this happened, because I could have seen it farther down,
right.
but I just wasn't in a good mindset. So, anyway, so I've got these 4 traumatized kids, and I finally get them home. We're okay. But that weekend, I had a friend of mine die. Now, this was a friend that I hadn't really talked to in 4 years, but I cared about him, and he died, and that group of friends were ones that I used to party with. So I get home to my ex with these 4 traumatized children, and I decide to leave for the weekend. And I'm like, okay, see ya. I'm going to this funeral. And I use that weekend as an excuse to get drunk
Mm,
and just to act really stupid. So he's stuck with these 4 kids that are traumatized. We don't know if they're truly injured or not. They ended up being fine, But in my alcoholic state of mind, I was like, this is too hard, this is too heavy, I'm leaving. And so I left for the weekend and got drunk. And so when I got back, that was the end. We were just he rightfully so was frustrated with me, and that was just it. He had his own stuff going on, but that was kind of like that was our last weekend. I
yeah,
I just was not in a good place. So, anyways, we decided to split up at that point, and so I drove to California to drop off his kids, and or Washington. They needed to go back up to Washington, after a month. They stayed with us for a month. We pretended like we were okay, we stayed,
for the sake of the
we
kids, I guess, yeah,
yes. Yeah.
okay,
And so then, yeah, I took them. And then when I came back, I had that feeling again, you need to get to Florida. And so I decided to drop everything. I did it the wrong way. I knew I needed to go to Florida. It was again that feeling from God, but I did it the wrong way. I did
right,
it in a very, I'm going to trash my entire world and leave. So this
mm,
happened, and I dropped out of school. And the good thing is I told him, hey, I need to go to Florida. And he's like, you've been feeling like you need to, you probably should. But instead of doing it the right way, I took my financial aid money, dropped out of school, and then deuced. And so that leads me to the beginning of my bottom and getting sober. And I can talk about that next time. But that's just kind of, where things were for me. I got out of the military and I never processed through anything. And so I was trying to, on one level, continue moving forward, like with my schooling and stuff like that, trying to have a relationship, but I was so stuck in this victim mentality and trauma and stuff like that, and so I just never really processed through anything. But like I said, I was so grateful that during this time, my body is also having issues, my mind is having issues, but I'm able to go to the VA. I'm able to have the medical care. I'm able to have the emotional care. And so that kind of kept me going, but it was just a life of distraction because I wasn't able to process through all of this stuff. And then I put myself in even more situations. So that's kind of what my adjustment was like, was trying to hold on, but also distraction and not really doing things, kind of taking hostages in my route as I'm going between him, and then also, I had some good friends, but took advantage of a lot of them, or I would only spend time with them when they could provide something for me, you know. So it was just a very selfish, self-centered life for a while. That was just, I didn't give myself time to process through anything, and so then I just perpetuated more patterns of addictions and distraction. So that's my journey of what it was like when I got back.
Yeah, and a lot of things is we don't really have the tools to know how to deal with a lot of things outside. We're not exactly the same person that we were going into the military, and then now we're coming out and we're kind of going back into the same environment, but now there's a long period of time that went by, and some things have changed, some things maybe haven't changed, right? And that's just the hard part is I don't think that we have the tools or even the mental capacity to process all of that, because we're still trying to there's a lot of things we're trying to do. We're still trying to disassociate ourselves with things and experiences while we were in the military. We're trying to seek out and become part of a population that we weren't really a part of for 4 years, and we were taught differently to react and be, and so now when we're in their setting, some of us were like fish out of a water, a fish out of water, and we don't know how to react and know how to be. Um, I think what we're gonna do is we'll wrap it up, you know, here on this one, and I'll do mine on the next one. That way we don't give you guys another 2 hours to listen through, because I'm sure I can go off for a whole another hour in general. But once again, I really do hope you guys are all getting something from this. This is us sharing our experiences, sharing things that may not be things that we're proud of, but they're things that we want to share and get out to the rest of everybody. So maybe you guys don't necessarily have to go through the same type of heartaches and same experiences that a lot of us do, right? And I think that that's a goal for many of us veterans out there. At least I know it is for me, and I'm sure Maria as well. But we want our brothers and sisters to have a smooth transition when they get out. We would love for them to have a better fall, and have a little bit more of cushion to fall back on. And whether that be, I don't know, more resources, but nevertheless, if you can hear it coming from your brothers and your sisters, maybe there's some things that you can kind of plan and prepare yourself for. And maybe you guys won't have as so many shortcomings as some of us have, and I think that we want to try to build a strong bridge, right? We want to build that strong bridge so everybody can walk over it, and some of you ain't going to fall off or whatever. We want to have that strong foundation, and part of that is just being transparent, and letting you guys know where we came from, letting you know what that experience was like for us. And not to say that, everybody's experience is going to be the same, because that would be absolutely crazy. And you can come from the same branch, you can come from the same MOS and have a completely different output and experience of what you went through. But that's the beauty of it all, right? We can pick each other's brains and stuff like that, and then we can find similarities, and then we can build upon those similarities, right? And we can say, hey, I'm not alone, and that kind of will help you guys through your journey as well, because at the end of the day, we want everybody to have a clear path. We want you guys to have a healthy mind. We want you to give the world the best version of yourself. um, a lot of us were trained in a way that only a small percentage of the world will ever get to experience that. And we are considered the number one fighting force in the entire world, right? And there's no reason why that has to stop when the DD-214 is handed over. There's no reason that we still can't be that strong, powerful force. We just got to find a way to how do we start building and getting on a foundation that we all feel comfortable that's not going to crumble beneath us. And I think that, leaning upon one another is important. Finding your communities with your brothers, your sisters, out there. You don't even have to be able to go see them in person. Maybe you can find something like a Zoom calls, or there's a lot of groups out there now that are just meeting with each other on the backside. Facebook has thing on Messenger where you can call each other, and you could have like group calls, little things like that. Take advantage of the technologies out there. A lot of us just go brain rot with it and just sit there and watch these half naked females and people just doing crazy stuff. Put it to some good use, man. There's some great that we can use from it, and reach out and start connecting with one another. Maybe you guys can come up with a great idea of a podcast. Maybe you can come up with a song. Maybe you can come up with a new nonprofit, but just talking to one another, sometimes it just sparks things, right? Ideas, interest, commonality, camaraderie, all those things. But is there anything else, Marie, you wanted to touch on before we kind of move forward, and another poem or anything as well?
Yeah. So the one thing that I just wanted to say before I move on is, if you are new and just getting out, or if you are out and you've been out for a while, okay, the hardest thing that I had to learn was that you have to be an advocate for yourself. Because the reality is, and maybe this isn't fair, and it doesn't matter if it's fair or not, because it is the reality right now. Okay, not everyone is going to come after you.
Right.
There aren't people that are seeking for you if you need help. Sometimes there are, and I'm saying, God puts some awesome people in our lives, but a lot of times we have to be our own advocate. So there is so many resources out there. Just because they are not coming to you, don't use that as an excuse. Don't use that as an excuse to be resentful or that nobody cares. They do care. They are just so overly overwhelmed with how many people are needing the help that it is important that you go and find the help. So be an advocate for yourself. That was the best thing that I did, right? Is I reached out to the VA and I was like, hey, I need some mental health help. I reached out to the school's veteran aid, or the veteran department, and I said, hey, I need a support group. You know, in my sobriety, I've reached out to Wounded Warrior Project. I've reached out to a couple other different projects, that are available. Like you said, there's all these nonprofit organizations that are out there to help as well, and all these Facebook groups. Team Red, White, and Blue, awesome one, because that one, they go out and they just socialize and do sports activities, like they do running or hiking or stuff like that. So like there's all these different groups out there, but you have to be an advocate for yourself. With your disability, go and fight it. Like, yes, they gave me my disability, but over the years, I have had to fight it to get to the
Don't take
percentage
no
that
for an
I'm at now.
answer if you
Yes,
really feel that you deserve it. Like,
yes.
because
And
there's
if,
the chance you might get denied the first time, maybe
yes,
even a second time, but sometimes it takes that third time. And that what
yes,
I think a lot of them hope is that you do tap out, but
yep.
stay the course.
Well, and then also, if you're not getting the right treatment for mental health or physical health, go and find a new doctor. Go
Right.
and find a new therapist. Go and find a new support group. Go,
Yep.
just be your own advocate. Do not lay down in victim mentality thinking everyone's out to get you. They're not. They're just overwhelmed. So go and find a new help, because the help is out there. And
And
so
don't
one
have the
day,
mentality they owe me. Just go in there with the
yes,
mentality I need to get this done, and that
yes.
there's you
And
got to have a different mentality about it.
yes. And one day maybe everyone will have, they will have a perfect outreach, they will have perfect medical care, they will have perfect, that would be so
Sure.
fantastic. But
Yeah.
don't be resentful that it's not like that right now. Just be your own advocate and go get the help that you need. If you need extra care, go find it.
Yep.
Go be the advocate. Be annoying. That's one of the things that I will say with my medical treatment. I have been so annoying. I will call, I will email, hey, I need this, hey, I need this, hey, remember this, I need this, and
There's a
that is how
saying,
I've gotten the treatment.
there is a saying, the squeaky wheel gets attention. If you ain't
Yes.
squeaking, they don't hear it. So hey,
But squeak in the right way. Don't scream and
correct.
yell at them. Be
Yes.
be obnoxious, but not an asshole.
Tactful. You got to be tactful with it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And there's a
Yes.
way of being, and like I said, that's not going with the you owe me mentality. That
Yes.
kind of mentality sometimes tend to really get you going, right? So,
Yes.
you know, and sometimes, like I said, you're going to get frustrated because that is really their mission, and they throw you into these number rings, and you'll get thrown into them, and you'll be like, "Well, you need to call this person." They told me to call you. Well, you need to call them. And it's funny because at the end of the day, you almost end up right back to the original person that you got the phone number from. Trust me,
Yep.
guys. I've been down the road. It is a really path that they really will throw a lot of things for you to trip up on. And I really, at this level, as many stories as I've heard about this, I do feel like there's somewhat of a design there to do that to you guys, to all of us, is to make us want to stop, not want to do it no more. We don't like paperwork. They throw a lot of paperwork at. We don't like doctor appointments. Well, you got to go to 30 of them, and you got to keep going to the same. And then you're like, oh gosh, dang it, I just win. I don't want to go again. And you got to play the
Do it anyway.
games. You got to play the
Yes.
games, because at some point in time it is game over, and there is a winner and a loser in the game. You know what I mean? And they taught you guys to not stop and don't quit. You know what I mean? So don't let that, keep fighting. And that's all it is we got to keep fighting. Keep fighting the fight.
Yep. So, anyways, yeah, like thank you for having me here again. Like this has been great, kind of reflecting. And it's been fun to see the what not to do based in my past, learning what I am doing now that is more beneficial than what I didn't do back then. You
Right.
know what I mean? So it's been
Gotcha.
it's
Yep.
been it's been fun to kind of like to evaluate the lessons I've learned, which is the name of this poem that I'm going to read to you.
Perfect.
So, anyway, so along all of this journey from my past, my present, and just everything that I've been through, there are these lessons that I've learned that have helped me. And so I this is just like a short and sweet poem that I just wrote in May. It's
Perfect.
something that I've had the first two lines for a couple years now, and then I finally came up with the rest of the poem. Because sometimes that's how my poems work, right? It's like I'll have one line or I'll have a title, and it might take me years. Other times I'll sit and write a big old long poem in like an hour. So it just kind of depends.
Got
But this
you.
one is kind of like an overarching. Here are the lessons that I've learned in this journey. You
Okay.
know. I am where I am, and that's where I am. And that is okay today. Tomorrow, I'll be where I need to be, and if I must stay, I may. I am who I am, and that's who I am. With help from God, I know. The choices I make don't change my worth, they just help me grow. I feel what I feel, and that's what I feel. There is no shame in that. I cannot blame it on what others do, for a feeling is not a fact. I can't live in the future or in the past because I'll miss the present. I can find peace no matter what's happened, even if life's not pleasant. Lessons I've learned and scars I've earned are many and intense. Some of them, though worth a lot, come at great expense. I've shed old skin and people too. It has not been pretty. I must be careful avoiding the trap that is called self-pity. I still make mistakes. There's more growth ahead. I keep pushing through. In my mind, God placed a picture of a spiritual rendezvous. As I keep up the effort, trying my best, I know He's healing me. When this life is over, He will embrace the perfect version of me.
That's awesome. I know I
Thank
threw your ass off right there because you had that.
You did.
You had that look. I was like, where did he go?
I thought I lost you there for a second.
No, you got that solo stage, girl. She's just like,
Yeah.
oh, you left me.
Yeah.
Now that was a
Yeah.
really good one, and yeah, thank you so much once again for sharing. You know, your experiences and like I said, getting out is probably one of the hardest parts about receiving that DD 214, you know, and is the what's next kind of thing. And if you got it figured out, kudos. And that's why I try to tell a lot of you guys to really try to plan ahead. If you only plan on doing 4 years, 4 years goes by so fast. You know, I think before I even got to the fleet, I spent about 6 to 8 months doing all kinds of other stuff before I even went onto the fleet, you know, and then so there's a lot of, you know, stuff that we're trained, and it's hard to lose when you get out. And some of it's good, some of it's bad, right? You know, there's both. But I just don't think a lot of us were afforded, you know, that opportunity to get out, right? Because like when I got out in the year 2004, there was a war still going on. You know what I mean? So a lot of guys were and gals were still deployed and you know, doing stuff. So they didn't have a lot of time to spend there and worry about everybody getting out. They had a war to worry about. There was a mission there. So all right. Well, we'll go ahead and cut it off here. And when we come back next week, I will go ahead and talk about how getting out was for me. We'll talk about, you know, about 5 years after I got, you know, up to about the 5-year point of when I got out. And because there's a lot of happened right there in that 5 years. Because when you get out, you just feel like you got to accomplish so much. I went crazy with it, I think.
That was just 4 years that I
no moderation.
so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, we hope you guys are enjoying this. Please like, share it, all that great stuff. It really helps us out, and it is completely free of charge. You can find us on all the places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Overcast, TuneIn. We even on all kinds of places. So just go check us out. And we hope you guys have an amazing day. And remember how we say, don't let the day kick your ass. Make sure you're out there kicking it. Until next time, we'll see you guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.